Support for WUWM podcasts comes from Potawatomi Casino Hotel Milwaukee, home to 24/7 excitement, dining, and an on-site hotel at 1721 West Canal Street. More information at potawatomi.com.
Lake Effect brings you conversations about what's happening in Milwaukee and the people, places, and organizations that shape the community. This is Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
The library is more than just books, and our series with the Milwaukee Public Library called Books and Beyond showcases just that. We share resources, book recommendations, and some cool stuff you just might not know about. This month, we're exploring some stories in honor of the spooky season with MPL's Special Collections and Archives Department. They're hosting an event called Milwaukee Mysteries, True Crime and Paranormal, to take a historical spin on the theme with real people, places, haunts, and events in the Milwaukee area. To learn more, I'm joined by librarian archivist Casey Lapworth, who begins by explaining how their librarian take on spooky season came about.
We get a lot of questions, and a lot of people are interested in the whole true crime. I mean, we have a whole section in the library devoted to that. And I guess I just saw more like true crime stuff coming up on some of my TV subscriptions, and they're advertising as, Halloween and spooky season. So, and I have a couple of coworkers here who are really into true crime. And so I thought, what if we can show people what we have on some of these? So that's why we kind of also brought out the paranormal stories, because people love a good ghost story, and there's plenty of buildings and places around here that are presumed haunted. I even heard something on the radio this morning that said some of the Dodgers players who were staying at the Pfister were a little freaked out over apparent hauntings. I thought, how perfect.
The ghosts are doing the work to throw them off their game, right?
Yes.
Well, yeah, with all of our history, Milwaukee has its fair share. So if someone is interested in learning more about a ghost story they heard about or a true crime event in the city, how can the library and the Special Collections Department be used to dive a bit deeper into anything that might intrigue someone to head into the library and find out more?
Well, there's two places I would go right off the bat, and one isn't even Special Collections. We have newspaper databases, and we have one that takes the Journal, the Sentinel, and the Journal Sentinel back to some of its earliest times. And so that's the best resource, especially for some older things, or at least to get more context around something that happened. If we have had people come into the Zeidler Humanities Room and be like, I heard someone died in my building. How can I find that out? And the best thing is to look at the newspapers. And you can, if you're a city resident, you can search from home. Otherwise, you can come to any library branch, not just Central, and use our Wi-Fi or use our computers, and you can keyword search. And the other thing you can do, especially if it was a big kind of city happening where alderman or the mayor was involved or knew about it or spoke about it, you can look through archival papers. So you just go to archival resources in Wisconsin, and you can keyword search by the name of the victim or the name of the criminal or whoever suspected. And the same thing with hauntings. I mean, just put in, some of the stories, and you can keyword search some of that. And I was aware of the ones that we had because I'd helped process some of those. So it's very interesting. And then, of course, I'm interested, and then I go down a rabbit hole about all this stuff too. So those are the two main sources. I mean, you could always ask us too. You send an email to MPL archives@milwaukee.gov, or we have a Ask a Question box on our website. So even if we don't have special collections, we might have other stuff on it. Just by the nature of us being we're coming up on 150 in a couple of years. I mean, we are part of the community. And so what we collect, sometimes we just happen to have the stuff because we lived through the time with the community. So you never know what you might find.
We can attest to that here at the station because I know most recently my colleague Joy Powers spent a lot of time at the library looking up the victims of the Bayview Massacre and going down a deep rabbit hole for a recent Bubbler Talk. So that's there to check out, and the library was a big help with that. So you mentioned there's paranormal, there's true crime victims. Some of this stuff can get a little gnarly. And while people are probably intrigued by it, maybe they're unsure about these topics or what they might find. Are there any reassurances that you can share with listeners about what kind of materials are accessible to the public?
Most of what we have is not anything graphic. We don't have graphic photos. We don't have police investigation files. We don't have any confidential. The police keep all of that. Most of what you'll find, at least some of the stuff I've used, is just times where it was mentioned in the city archives, or it's about the aftermath. So you can come and just look around and you can read more detail if you want. I have some newspapers I'm putting out, so there might be some headlines of stuff, but there's no graphic images. We want to make this interesting for those who are really into it, but I don't want to turn anybody off.
Right. Yeah. So to get into some of the things that'll be highlighted for the event, the Milwaukee Mysteries event on Monday, let's start with a couple stories and we'll start off with a man named Klaus Linderfelt. Who was he? What makes this story stand out to you?
Well, he is very close to home for us. So he was our library director from about 1880 to 1892. And the story was, well, we've actually found proof of it in our own library records that he embezzled money from the library, from the city. He embezzled, at the end, they figured out it was like $9,000, a little over 9,000. Of course, I don't have that on hand to how much that's worth today. And the story is kind of strange because he had been doing it for like 10 years. And then they caught him and he admitted it right away. And his excuse was that being the library director put him in the upper echelon of society, and he didn't make enough to keep up appearances. So that was his excuse. He had a lot of wealthy friends in the area who supported him. They even paid back the money that he embezzled. People were donating to help pay back that. It was even people within the library. He was really well liked. And he was thought of very well. He was the president of ALA, the American Library Association. And of course, then he finally pleaded no contest. And then he got a suspended sentence. And then there was some other drama about him getting another job and where was he? And then public sentiment started to move against him more. So he kind of disappeared. And then as I was reading some of the papers, it was funny because it was almost like an Elvis kind of sighting thing. They'd be like, oh, somebody saw him in Boston. Oh, he's in London in a bookstore. But he did disappear right about the end of July, early August. Nobody knows exactly where he went, but he ended up in Paris where he studied to be a doctor and his family joined him about 2 years later. So I don't know what kind of formal schooling he went to be a doctor in 2 years, but in 1890s, that could just be reading a bunch of books. So
right, and he remained in Paris. He never came back to the States.
Yep, he's buried in Paris.
Wow. Okay, interesting. Also interesting how people rallied to refund what he embezzled.
Mm-hmm. He had a big fancy house, but he borrowed the money from a wealthy acquaintance friend, and then he never actually made any payments, and so then he just signed it over to him when they left. And so he's always been a little infamous. We've been aware of him, but I've really fallen into a lot of research about him recently because I'm processing the MPL archives, and we actually found a bunch of his papers in a safe that had been locked for years, right about last year. So we found his original resignation letter. We found the subscription, the papers that had everyone's names on it who were pledging money. The next library director, who was his deputy at the time, she pledged $200. And in 1892, that was a lot more than $200.
Yeah.
So it was just amazing, all the people that did support him. So, and then there were threats that the state was going to come after him. And then there were threats that they were trying to get him back from Europe. And so it was really, really, it was the story. It was a big headline. And then all these other, they wanted to audit all these other city departments, to check, if anyone else, and they didn't find anything. I guess some of the books in a couple places were some dollars short, but it was nothing anyone was really embezzling. So it really kicked off a kind of search among all the city departments. So it's pretty fascinating. And he technically resigned in the beginning of August, but he backdated it to July 1st. So I found that someplace else. And then it was a funny thing about the American Library Association. They basically wiped him from their rolls because they backdated his resignation from the ALA. So like he just showed up as a footnote as one of their directors or their directors. And then it wasn't until just like 2 years ago, I got in contact with the ALA because I wanted a picture of him for the director's wall display in Central. I was helping with that. And the archivist I talked to, like, I asked him for some pictures, and then she's like, "Oh, she was like, I fell down the rabbit hole of this story. This is really intriguing." And so it turns out when the ALA president list got put on the web, they left him off completely. So now he's officially been restored, for better or worse.
With his own footnote under there.
So I got him restored back to the historical list of directors for whatever that's worth.
Right. Oh, what a deep dive. That's really fascinating. Well, up next, we have, maybe people don't know the man, but they know perhaps the event that happened here in Milwaukee. We have John Trank. Why is he rather infamous here?
Well, he attempted to kill Theodore Roosevelt when he was campaigning here in Milwaukee in, I believe it was 1912. And so we actually have the papers of his court case because he was tried here in Milwaukee. So that we kind of stumbled upon within our city archives kind of collection. It had never really been processed. And so pretty early on when we started reprocessing and putting stuff on the web, our finding aids, is when we redid it. And then we kind of discovered about this guy. And he was really something else. I mean, he like wrote a manifesto. It was printed in the paper. He believed that Theodore Roosevelt had secretly assassinated William McKinley. And so William McKinley showed up in a dream to him and told him no third termers, because it would have been Theodore Roosevelt's third term. Roosevelt lost a third, but so he had a dream, and that's why he decided he was going to kill him.
And he was following Teddy from like New Orleans up to Milwaukee on his campaign trail, right? It was a long game.
Yep. Yeah, he kept coming. And then somebody talked to him, I think later on when Franklin Roosevelt got his third term, and he said, because he was declared insane, and somebody quoted him in one of the articles I just read, and they said, well, he said if he had been out, he would have interrupted that. So in other words, he would have gone after Franklin too.
Ooh, yep. And he actually was also imprisoned here in Wisconsin as well, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So some of these figures, it's like really interesting, ominous local history. And then we have the paranormal. And if people want to read more, there is a story we did on Engine House 35 being haunted, built over the grounds of Fairview Mausoleum. And lastly, I'm sure you have a good amount of general Halloween type materials, right? And ghost stories, just kind of fun things for people to peruse.
So, I mean, we have some like advertisements with pumpkins, and I think my coworker found something with like a big witch on it. And then we have plans to buildings that are allegedly haunted. I can't confirm any of this, but that are allegedly or rumored to be haunted. So we have some plans and some newspaper articles that we'll have out. So it can just be kind of perusing. I went through our photo collection quite extensively too. So to see if we have photos of some of these places, even if we don't have any actual archival records, we still have older photos that are part of special collections. The newspapers are part of periodicals. And we're getting some of them out that you wouldn't be normally able to see because they're so fragile, but we'll get them out and we'll cover them up so nobody can touch them, but they'll be out for you to see.
Well, and I love it when all these archive materials are brought out because it's very cool to see something in person, something historical like that. So this and lots more coming up for Milwaukee Mysteries. But for today, Casey, thank you so much for sharing more about it.
No problem. Thanks for being here.
Casey Lapworth is a librarian archivist at the Milwaukee Public Library. Their program for exploring archives, Milwaukee Mysteries, True Crime and Paranormal, will be held on Monday, October 20th. It'll be from 4:30 to 6:30 at night at the Milwaukee Central Library branch, and it's a free event, so no registration is needed. You can explore some pictures of the materials that we talked about, as well as find past Books and Beyond stories at wuwm.com.
You can find more interviews like this one by visiting wuwm.com/Lake Effect. And while you're there, subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast.